Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
Before today's episode, Web Indexer. It's an AI chatbot that sits on your website and answers client questions around the clock. We use it right here on Knack for Business. You can test it yourself, search past episodes, get answers any time of day. 5-minute setup, no coding required. Link is in the show notes if you want one for your business.
So, for you, the listener, how do you turn all the attention you get at trade shows into real leads and sales instead of empty conversations and missed opportunities? That's the core problem our guest tackles. In this episode, he breaks down how smart podcasting, digital strategy, and on-site content creation can transform trade show traffic into measurable business growth. If you're tired of leaving events with nothing more than a stack of business cards and wish your trade show presence actually generated revenue, stay tuned. He'll show you how to cut through the noise and make every event count. Our guest today is Max Frambach. He's a savvy and inventive digital strategist who transforms online attention into genuine leads and sales. As the force behind Blurrberry Media, he crafts clear-cut marketing plans, sharp brand messaging, and data-driven campaigns that help businesses grow without wasting time or budget. He tackles a problem many companies face, flooding social channels with content, but failing to connect with the right people to achieve measurable results. If you're ready for marketing that actually moves your business forward, he can help you cut through the noise and make it happen. Max, absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
What's your favorite quote?
Well, my favorite quote, for me personally, that would be that the most important thing that we have that would be my favorite quote. It's not necessarily a quote from anywhere specific, but especially it also resonates with the topic of trade shows because when we're going somewhere, we only have a certain amount of time. And I think podcasting is something that also helps with that. So it's not money. It's not any tangible or intangible thing. Time is the most valuable thing that we have.
So I've got to ask, to me, you're Keanu Reeves. Bernie says it's John Wick. I'm much more into Keanu because he has powers.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to make this trade show? Do you show up in old blue Lincolns? Do you have very big black guys with glasses? How do you make this work?
So normally when I go to a trade show, I have my entire posse with me. No, I'm just kidding. So I actually made the decision recently to start more like this. I've had it happen in the plane. I've had it happen in the bus, the tram. Recently at a football stadium after a football match, someone came up to me and he was like, you really look like that. You really look like that. And I asked him, the actor, he's like, yeah, that one. I was like, Keanu Reeves? He said, yes, exactly. Yeah, maybe I should make that part of my trademark. That, or when I enter a room, everyone's like, is that Keanu or is that Max from Blurrberry Media Agency?
Maybe you should go red mic or blue mic.
Yes, definitely.
Exactly. Thank you. I haven't even thought about that one yet. I'll make sure to incorporate that.
So you've had an aha moment. What made you go, you know what, today I'm going to be a digital strategist? Because you know what, in high school, although Wayne and I are just a tad bit older, and our tech days are a little bit different than yours have been. What made digital strategists going, that's the ticket, that's where I want to go?
Yeah. So for context, I'm currently 27 years old. Turned 27 3 days ago, actually. Just new to the group. No, but what made me go this route, it's a bit of a longer story. So when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted. I actually really wanted to study animal behavior. But being from the Netherlands, there were not really any universities or any programs within the Netherlands that actually taught this at the university level. So my mom came to me and she said, Max, do you just go and study for 1 year at our university that we have here, which is still a relatively well-known university, Tilburg University. Just do something for 1 year, at least you'll be studying, you won't be out of it. And that study was actually on online culture, media, art, and society. So that's where I started being more involved with the digital platforms on a educational level. I was a little bit bored during my studies, and that made me actually reach out to different endeavors. And so I actually started a international student association because there was not that much for the international crowd. And if you put Dutch and international next to each other, one is a very homogeneous group and one is a very diverse group. And for the diverse group, there was only one place to go. You can see that there are quite some issues with that. From there on, I started making more promotional material for that because I saw early on that the traditional student associations, they were very much on their based on their network. They knew that the Dutch students going there would know about them, and they weren't very active with digital promotion. And being an international student association, we thought, okay, we have to try to reach more people within the cracks that are falling outside of this normal group. And that's where that really started. Then I moved on to a music studio. They actually invited me because they said, "Oh, wow, how you're doing this. You're just hands on marketing wise and you're going for it. You're not putting any bears on the road," which was amazing. Join us. Join us in this music studio. And so slowly I started developing more and more into this area. But I was very wide on which video productions that I was doing. So I was doing videos for artists. I was doing after movies for events. I was doing business videos, company videos. And so slowly I started noticing that for me, this created a lot of noise. There were a lot of different channels, which I am very blessed to have learned all of these different channels and how they operate. But what I notice is that, okay, this noise is not just for me, but it's for everyone. Everyone is sort of experiencing this noise. And what that is doing now, the US, of course, has been on this earlier than we were, but a lot of people are trying to go back to other ways of content or other forms of content, which are bringing a bit of calmness to that noise. And podcasting, in my eyes, is one of those ways that are people are reverting back to calmness. We see a return of vinyls, so there's a calmness in how we consume music. People are sitting down more, they're listening at a calmer pace, and I think that also resonates with the content that a lot of podcast productions do. And I think that when you are honing down on a specific topic, such as podcasting, you are more inclined to also dive deeper into it. So what I've been doing recently is reading a lot of publications from our national broadcasting system on how they measure things, how they so to see where the market is currently. And yeah, so trying to expand my knowledge in that sense.
Okay, it's origin story time. Tell me about Blurrberry Media.
So Blurrberry Media it's actually a name that was picked at quite random. I knew that I had to get a better name. My name before was Anticlimax Productions because in high school, funny enough,
That's not a good dating app, by the way.
it is
Just
not.
FYI.
It is not. But it was very recognizable. So people immediately knew who it was. But it came from in high school where people were making they were using their name and putting it in different words. So someone that I know, they had changed their name into ibuprofen because their name was Femke. And so my name became then, because there's not that much with Max that was available, it became Anticlimax because at first I wanted. So I had to change that. I had to become a bit more professional. And I was looking around me, which brands are a bit more traditional, but very well established. And that's where, for instance, Burberry was one of the brands that is very well established. But there's also the Blueberry phones. So then it kind of became like an intersection of both of those. Okay, what's something that has to do with digital media, but also creates some resonance of establishment of something with a foundation. And that's what became Blurrberry Media Agency. It has been that for about 2 to 3 years. And I'm currently with the next phase of me as a person, me as an entrepreneur, me as a business owner, looking at where it will go into the next year.
So when you're coming across a company and this is, "Hi, I want some market presence," what's the typical first thing that you look for, and what's the typical first thing that, yeah, you know what, you're making the typical mistake? So what does that typical mistake look like?
So the typical mistake for that I see around me with business owners is that they don't know who they are selling to, which is, I think, an age-old problem within marketing and within businesses, is that a lot of people, they are when they're especially self-employed or a one-man show or one-person show, they tend to try to get everyone as their customer. And what I see when it comes to digital productions, whether it be podcasts, whether it be company videos or after movies, they don't know who they are sending this message to. They are often afraid to make certain decisions because they're spending a lot of money on something. So they would want to have it resonate with a larger audience. And the problem with that is that you are creating such a large audience that the way that you're structuring your content, you cannot actually provide something valuable to them. Whereas if you are deciding which is the core customer that I want to bring upwards in my sales funnel, then you are honing in on problems that they actually have, that they actually experience, and therefore you are contributing way more to their customer journey. Whereas if you are just filming something at random, you are not contributing anything for your customers. So that I would say is the main issue that I see around me.
Max, it seems like you found a way to produce digital witchcraft. You develop leads from online attention. Everyone talks about it, almost no one successfully does it. Tell me a story.
So what I mentioned or touched upon earlier is that the digital noise is growing and growing and growing. So what people are especially susceptible to is that when you are able to combine the digital with the offline, you are creating a lot more value for your listeners and for your audience. A good example for that is, for instance, a podcast that I'm currently doing the post production for called Club Crash. It's not about crashing a car, but it's the word for the place where your kids go to when you have to work. And it's two hosts that are quite young. And what we see is that there's a lot of digital noise. So trying to cut through the online audience's attention is more difficult. But if you can place this in a tangible place where the potential audience is going around their day, you are creating a lot more new leads going to.
So, understanding your audience means you can deliver a message. How do you have that clarity for the message? And sometimes that clarity of that message can be a story. Do you build up a story, or do you just say, "I'm here," and just it's anticlimactic? Sorry, kind of rolling back on our previous conversation. How do you build that moment of going, "I'm here," and has that resonance? How do you find that? And every audience is going to be different too, by the way.
Yeah, so I think that the most important thing when it comes to that is to listen. As people creating products, we often try to immediately solve a problem before we fully understand the problem that is at hand, which means that if you have a customer coming to you, you have to actually listen to them. And you have to find ways of knowing whether the product is right for them. You can sell a product to anyone. So anyone coming to you and they say, "Hey, I want this," sure, you can sell it to them. But to actually listen to what is the story that they are telling me and what are underlying potential things that I, with my experience and skill set, am hearing that they might not hear themselves, you can then start after fully listening till the end, no interruption. Then you can start holding up the mirror, like, okay, so what I'm hearing is this. Is that correct? And whether that be this specific conversation about specific points or audiences, or whether that is a story, I think that the most important job that we as people producing these products, the most important thing we need to do is to actually listen to the customer or listen to the person in front of us. Because then whether it be a story or whether it is the search for a potential client or the ideal client, listening is at the starting block of all of these different formats.
So, some clients I run into in areas that they aren't experts become sponges for every opinion going, and I pick up buzzwords like Dilbert. How do you debunk people who you're pretty sure got their knowledge from a tavern or a coffee shop?
I think coffee shop for you and me means something different being from the Netherlands.
What is an edible in any other land, right?
Exactly, exactly. How I go about that, it is an interesting thing because it comes back to knowing your ideal client, right? It's knowing who do you want to serve. So when we're looking at customers, there are customers in different segments. There are customers that indeed they are at the start. What you just described is very much a customer that is at the start of their journey. They are insecure about their service. They are insecure about their product, which I don't mean in a negative way, but they are at the start of their journey. And as they are going through this journey, they'll learn to stop listening to some opinions and start listening to other opinions. And what I would advise to any company in the production side of things, so for instance, in the sense of podcasting, the company that is creating podcasts and gets a customer that starts asking them, like, "Hey, I want a podcast." And okay, very nice. We have built this idea now together of what the podcast should be. Customer takes this podcast and goes to their cousin, or goes to their father, or goes to their son, or goes to an acquaintance and asks everyone for opinions, and everyone comes with a different opinion. Customer comes back to you and they say, "Hey, I've asked them, and they actually think it should be different." If, as a podcast producer, your clientele is a clientele that is more established, then that is your cue to say, "Hey, I think you are not my customer. I wish you a lot of luck. You can perhaps take this idea, but maybe the podcast company down the street could help you with this. So it's again very much about knowing who you are and what skill set and knowledge you bring to the table without bringing arrogance. I think you should be realistic about which customer you want to serve, because maybe this customer is someone you want to serve because you are a location that actually provides a studio that is just, here are 4 microphones. You have the studio for 2 hours. Have fun, which is perfectly fine. But then you're going to be lower with your price point. You are actually going to tell them, okay, it will cost you $150 an hour. You will get the P video feed and you will get the unprocessed audio. And there you go. That's what you get. And you can do whatever you want with that. But then you know that that is your clientele. And then that is a very easy sell. Client is, of course, not going to be happy because it won't get the numbers that they want and it won't have the huge impact that they are envisioning. But if you want that big impact, you're going to go to a production company that knows how to create that impact. And you're not going to listen to your sibling who has an opinion or your neighbor who has an opinion. You're going to listen to the experts that have an opinion, because these experts are most likely surrounded by other experts. So when it comes, for instance, to marketing, I know very well how to produce a podcast. I know very well the basics of marketing. But if I want to actually have a full-on audience report done, or to create the ideal audience for a podcast, I will go to, which, no pun, my uncle, who is a marketing professor. Do keep it within the family in that sense, but it's because of the skill set that they have. So I would go to another expert to have them build on that particular thing. But of course, a customer will then charge or pay a premium for that, but they'll get a premium in return. So it's all about knowing where you are placed yourself within the market and how well you know your own audience.
Max, I want to discuss digital alchemy. What I mean by that is basically metrics. The podcast industry seems to be full of metrics, and the difficult part is to sort ones that are meaningful and ones that just sound really impressive. What are the metrics you focus on that you pass on to your clients and tell them the rest is noise? Help me.
Okay, so what I do is I try to find the incorporation within their own platforms, such as their website. Are they In the end, what we want to do is podcasts, when it comes to the sales funnel, for me, they are at the low and middle tiers of the sales funnel. Podcasts are not meant to drive the final sale. Podcasts, in my eyes, are very much a long-term informative process where the person that is in mostly the middle segment, they are trying to gain more information. So if that is your goal of, I want to educate my client, good ways to your metrics is, for instance, attach document downloads. If you have a website where you provide further information, you can measure how many people following a podcast episode have downloaded a specific piece of information from your website. And in the end, you're trying to build different steps along that way. Because if you are just going to measure the final sale of a product and the amount of listeners of a podcast, you're going to miss so much in between, because there's a whole customer journey between listening to a podcast and ending up buying something, whether that be a service or whether that be a tangible product. So what I try to do is I try to build these segments in between that can actually measure how they go through that funnel, being documents that are available or being other videos that they could watch. That is sort of how I build those metrics along.
I find it interesting because you've gone through your schooling system. You have an uncle that can tweak the system. How often do you review the process? We're on our season 4 now, and when I look back on our journey from season 1, things have changed. The formats changed slightly, where things get presented, etc. I hear what you're saying. Out goes the soundbite, and there's a transaction that happens, but there's a big air gap in between. So even reflecting on what we're going to be doing on the season 4 launch, how often do you go back and look under the hood, going, you know what? Hang on, there's a new tech, or at one point in time, so you're 27. So 20 years ago, was TikTok around, right? Oh, all right. So things start happening. Other things get added that have value. How often do you kind of go back and going, I wonder if I plug this in? Do you plug and play? Is there kind of a group that you go to and going, hey, I got a new widget here and it spins really well. You put it on your finger and so forth, right? How do you sort through that?
I do that all the time. I'm constantly looking in hindsight. So, what are old, whether it be technologies or trends? What were things that were moving the production? Because a lot of it is we try to, well, we tend to see the world always as in it's moving forward instead of it's moving circular. Or we're constantly saying that the next thing is better or better or better. But when I'm looking back, especially at the work that I was doing before, I don't necessarily think that the work was, of course, in some essences, the work was better or worse because I knew how to properly expose or I didn't know how to color grade or this and that. But when I'm looking back at the sort of skills that I was developing over time, I see that a lot of it has been preferences that I was having. And so things can actually really influence your creativity and you can try different things and retry things from a few years ago. So what we're seeing now, and that's actually something with a podcast that I'm going to build up soon about representing yourself in business, is that the world is always going in circles. We're always seeing trends come back and then they go away again. And then they come back and they go away. They come back and they go away. So there are, of course, a few technological advances such as AI that is helping us with transcribing audio quicker. But at the same time, I'm also trying to look into the future. And I know that a lot of data centers are just not profitable currently. So I also see that as okay, at this point in time, it is very useful, but I don't know if it's going to be there a few years down the line because all of the AI companies, they're going to have to look at their revenue model and how to improve that because they can't sell everyone 20 subscriptions. And that's what most of these revenue models are currently. So I'm always looking at it in a circular way and trying to find how was I doing things before and how am I doing things now and really put those next to each other and say, which one do I prefer? And maybe can I see to go back to that or what did I learn in between? And I try to put that to paper as well.
It looks like from the bio I got that you found a subset of a subset, a live business conference podcast.
Yes, sir.
What was the inspiration and what problem does it solve?
So the problem that it solves is the problem of time. So I already touched upon it earlier. The main problem that it solves is time. Where did this idea come from? The idea came from the digital noise that is there. I was attending quite some trade fairs, trade shows. And what I was noticing is that everyone was always running from one place to the other. Then everything was empty because everyone was at the speakers, but at the speakers it was way too full and no one could get in anymore. And the people having the stands, they were complaining because there was no one at their stands anymore. But then as soon as the speakers were done, the stands were overflowing. And then when you're looking at what are trade shows are the place that is a high condensed space of information, of knowledge of a specific niche. Because everyone with that particular interest that is very involved within the industry will be there. So I started looking at, okay, I want to gain more information. How can I gain information that was presented at the trade show? Take, for example, IBC in Amsterdam. I wanted to see what are some white papers that I can read about current developments. Do they maybe have a podcast that I can listen to? And what I noticed is that on their digital channels, Instagram being a bit more active, but especially YouTube was very neglected. There was barely any information there. They would every year, and this is with most of the trade shows, they'd pop a event after movie, and then you'd see a 2023 after movie, and then after that 2024 after movie, and then 2025 after movie. But in between, they would not post anything. Whereas they hold such a valuable community. They are the place for people within this specific niche to find more information, more information, gain new contacts. So this is where I saw that the two being podcasts and trade shows or trade fairs, they could marry each other in this space and really find each other. But then you have the issue of, okay, then we're building another podcast which has to cut through the digital noise. Now, cutting through the digital noise is very difficult, but we already have a physical place where all of our prospective audience is present. But then are we going to tuck away the podcast into a corner that's where it's being recorded? Or are we actually representing the podcast to all of the people there? Because what does every trade show have? Every trade show has a stage or multiple stages where you have speakers, where you have panels, but most of these are never to be seen online anymore. They're gone. They're, as in The Wolf of Wall Street, it's fairy dust. It doesn't exist. And I want to build a change in that. Now, of course, trade shows and trade fairs and conferences, they are very notorious for wanting to move. They want to go into the future because they see their numbers decline, but at the same time, they're very scared of changing their DNA. So I'm building a on-site podcast studio that actually fits within the current DNA. It builds a place where a speaker or a panel can still be held, but at the same time, it engages the audience that is present. Because now what you're doing is through silent disco headphones. So basically, headphones that can send out to a multitude of people, they can listen live to the podcast being presented to them. So you are actually creating a space where you can take one speaker stage away, put a podcast studio there with glass. We'll possibly add a photo of it. I'll send you one, Bernie, that we can add in here. But now you're building a new way of engaging. And at the same time as having this engagement that we already know, you're also prepping it for digital content. You're prepping it to go onto your media channels and to actually live a longer life there. Now, the problem that it further solves is the time that your participants have and the choices they need to make. Do they really want to go to that speaker, or could they also watch it later live? Now, because of that, you're diffusing your audience a lot more over the playground, to call it like that. They have way more time to actually go and make decisions that they say, okay, I want to still talk to them, and I don't have to sacrifice something else for that. That's sort of what it is in a nutshell.
So when you're setting up the stage, are you looking for this? Are you just doing a recording? Are you doing it live? Are you doing a panel setup where you're having, someone who's not, there might be some controversy, but it's not like the World on Fire controversy, but like, should I use the blue mic versus the red mic versus the black mic, where there might be nuances where it matters to the people in the industry. Is that the type of thing you're looking to do, or are you also doing like walking around talking to people, much like a news media, right? And where you're going, so what do you think of this particular instance of the 1000 super cutter slice and dice machine?
So the beauty of this is that you can actually build it out to however you would like it. The idea is that there's a core stage. This is a stage that is sort of built in a capsule. It's a glass studio, so people can look through. There's an audience section around it, so the audience is directly sitting at the stage as you would normally do with a speaker. And within that space, you can sort of decide, do I want to have one speaker, or do I want to have a panel? So in that sense, it very much flows with the desires of either the trade show or a company presenting at the trade show. And even then, you can say, we want to live stream it. So we actually want it to go directly to the air, or we want audience engagement. You can either put a microphone there for the audience to, at certain points, walk up to it and ask a question to either a panel member and have it actually recorded within your product that's going digital. You could also do this with a live camera feed and an interviewer walking over the stage. You can walk over the trade show. So there's all these ways of actually expanding on this pillar, and that's how I like to actually see it.
The podcast suppliers. Are you hearing good feedback? Are they excited about what you're doing? Anyone scared? Anyone think you're eating their lunch? What are you hearing from the industry?
So I'm thinking, at least from what I've heard from the trade show industry, is that it's being received very positive. They are looking for change. They don't know necessarily where to find that change because it can't be too scary, but it should be familiar, but it should still excite them. And when it comes to the podcasting space, it builds a lot of excitement as well because we are introducing a lot more companies to the idea of podcasting because podcasting doesn't necessarily have to be you sit and you listen. It can be way more of an engagement. And also these companies are locally, a trade show is always a place where people get together. So if we take the RAI in Amsterdam, there's companies coming from all over the world. One of the recent ones, the data center, cybersecurity, and AI conference that I went to, there were companies from China, there were companies from Taiwan, there were companies from, I think, Bulgaria, there were a few, and there were also from the US, Poland. They're all going to gather there. And they're going to see, hey, there's a new advancement within our industry. We could talk about our product in this way. And now when they're going home, and they might want to expand on this, they're going to source their local podcast production companies. So in a way, it's actually trying to get that ball rolling within the industry, within the business side of industry, because entertainment is already, it's big. Podcasts are being produced by so many entertainers, and that is very difficult. And there's often the perception of, oh, but podcasting is already so saturated. But when you're actually looking at the business side of things, how are companies implementing podcasts within their strategies, there are still a lot of possibilities and there's still a lot of ground to gain. And I actually hope that this will contribute to that ground. It's not necessarily eating anyone's slice of the cake. I rather see it as a whole different cake that is a sort of appetizer for the main cake. And that main cake can be eaten by a lot of podcast production companies all over the world. And hopefully that can actually bring us a lot more benefits.
One of the excitements around podcasts in the early days was the whole concept of narrowcasting and knowing your audience, that you're only talking to left-hand people with a limp or whatever it is. And that should mean sponsorship would be natural. I have seen a disconnect. What would make sponsorship become natural, and how would a person get it, and how would it be integral rather than just some snap-on, bolt-on silliness?
This is actually something that it has been intriguing Carl and me a lot recently. Many of you might also know Carl, of course. Bernie could maybe even touch upon that in a bit. But we are looking to share, or we're trying to build a network that actually shares this sort of knowledge, because what we already mentioned, I'm from the Netherlands, and what we know here is that especially this side of the industry is so far behind. When I'm saying that the Dutch market is not matured at all, people sometimes look at me and they say, huh, but we have such good podcasts. The quality of it is good. The audio of it is good. And when I say, yeah, but we're years behind the Americans, they then look at me and they say, huh? And then I explain to them that the whole advertising side of things is still so far behind. Companies within the Netherlands, they don't know how to properly advertise within podcasts. They don't know necessarily what their returns could be or should be. And there we see that the whole market still needs to move forward here. That means that there's a lot of disconnect when it comes to what you mentioned, the particular sponsors and particular advertisements for specific podcasts. Being you only have your left hand and your left leg, and you want a sponsor that knows how to build products for those people, they might not be as interested, like you said. But then you have a company that says, we'll put advertisements on all your podcasts, but then you have a podcast about taking care of the elderly, and then you have a advertisement for sports shoes. They're probably not going to play any soccer anymore, but there you go. There's a big disconnect there. And we're trying to build the connection between different actors within Canada and within the Netherlands to actually exchange more knowledge about that. So more on that soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Carl Riches from Podcast Solutions Made Simple has been a great support, both for us as well in this space. And it almost sounds like when you go to a foosball game, the European football versus the Canadian or American football, or even in hockey, you see around the billboards, right? All the around the arenas, you'll see the advertisers. And it's never noticed the geriatric homes being advertised in that space. Never. But you do notice the beverages, adult beverages, and insurance and the things that give you wings, kind of not.
Exactly.
When you're doing a production though, and you've touched on sponsorship and the marketing piece, there's a production piece. So you have your raw data, you have your raw feed coming in, and right now we're doing this as a recorded session, not live. We could do it live too, but yeah, we're doing it recorded. How do you manage it? How do you bring it together? Like, what is the process of going, okay, here's the raw data. Now I'm going to make sure the sound levels are nice and smooth. If there's visuals involved, there's a video component. How do I make that kind of, and then how do I fade? Like, it's like watching TV or going to the movies. And now it becomes, everything has, it's all under the surface, but there's labor of love involved in that. How do you manage that piece? Like, is that something you source out? Is that something you map out? How do you structure that universe?
So mainly for me, because I've run a lot of productions solo before. That's still coming from the time that I was doing video productions on my own. And what that had taught me is a lot of different. There's 1,000 little pieces that are moving simultaneously when you're recording a podcast, where your guest is entering. Someone has to talk to the guest. Someone has to entertain them. While potentially you're still setting stuff up. You're still having to check the audio levels, as you mentioned. You still have to check the video feed. What I noticed is that during my time as a solo video producer, before I made the full switch to podcasting, it taught me a lot about these different ways and how to try to make a lot of the work happen as quick as possible. And I think a lot of it has become some sort of inherent knowledge to myself. I know the equipment that I work with. That makes it a lot easier to set everything up a lot quicker. But there's a lot of scaling that you can do. So you can run, to be fair, nowadays you can run podcasts with your iPhone. You can, instead of having the 12,000 euro cameras that I have, you could have a 1,500 euro iPhone. And that is perfect. Again, it's about knowing your audience and what does the audience expect. So you can make it as easy and difficult for yourself as you would like. And with that, you don't need to be scared about the quality necessarily. I think that the moment is very important in itself, because in the end, if you're having a guest, their experience is just as valuable as the experience of the listeners. And I do have some sort of checklist, but for me, it's mainly knowing the equipment that I work with. Of course, I'm trying to simplify that process as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm building my own podcast studio, and there it will actually be just plug and play. The lights will stay the same, or they might move around a little bit, but I have the technical knowledge to within seconds see, okay, based on the grayscale of the video, I know that this person is overexposed or that person is underexposed. So we need to put this up, put that down. But then once you start putting the live streaming that you mentioned earlier, there's a lot more stakes at play. So I'm trying to get the team to grow to become 3 or more people per production at least.
So do you have a delay signal? I know that sometimes in American broadcasting, they have a 30-second delay like, person just said something. Nope, not now. So you have a beep or boop?
Yeah, exactly. No, I do build in a 30-second delay. So I make sure that everything is running smoothly in that sense. When we're doing a live stream, I always make sure that we have a 30-second buffer. But then I also try to make sure that there's someone engaging with the digital audience. So if there's a chat going on, I do have someone specifically sitting there for the chat, and we make sure that it's either that the way that the chat is communicated to the host is part of the podcast, whether they can actually see the podcast, or we have a microphone set up for the person reading the chat, and that they can actually engage quite quickly with that. And we do try to keep that as tight as possible, because we have often a live stream and also the production that is going afterwards. But what we do is we run the production with the SD cards in the cameras. So we make sure that the signal going out over live stream is the maximum. If we're working with the Blackmagic Studio, we can actually do it 4K, but most of the time it's 1080p. The cameras that I run, they can record 6K internally. So of course, that's a way nicer quality. And there's also a lot more opportunities with color grading in post-production. So what we do is we actually try to have that running simultaneously, so that for post-production, we can also optimize that, and we can actually have the flexibility to cut certain parts out, add in some reactions that we didn't see before, and actually take the creative liberty and also tidy that up a little bit.
You know, you just mentioned something, and I hadn't thought of it before, and it makes sense in the live feed. You have someone, it's like when you're having a communication, you're looking inwards, right? But you have someone looking outwards to see what the reaction is, and you're looking for feed. Have you ever explored, is there other technology other than, watching let's say if it's on Facebook Live, it's on LinkedIn Live, people are typing in, and someone goes, oh, by the way, buddy over here in Portland, Oregon says, I saw Sasquatch, and or that looks like John Wick, doesn't it? Do you use any other technology to kind of gauge audience feedback, so that if you're hitting a hot button topic, that you're getting to know this is hitting a lot, this is tripping more wires, it's actually reaching the base, or audience push and pull? And I think that there was a company here in the US called Nielsen's, right? They would do polling for TV. Are you getting that type of technology wrapped into this too?
So that often depends on which platform we're using and how difficult the steps are for the audience to engage with this sort of technology. Because if we're, for instance, taking Webinar Geek, there are a lot more tools incorporated within the platform to stay where you are and actually engage based on, for instance, meters. But if we're doing a live stream over YouTube, the most interaction that you can do, or via Twitch, you can actually comment. But as soon as you want to do polls, you're asking your audience, which are often on their phone, to actually leave the place where they are and go to a different place and then come back. So if your audience is mainly on their phone, we really try to limit it to the software that's at hand and what the software has available. If it is on let's say Zoom, we can actually ask the audience before, like, hey, open this platform, type in this or that, and then you can actually engage with the podcast or the talk that we're doing. And one of the ways that we have actually incorporated that, which was very funny, was a draw and guess game. So what we would do is we would have the audience draw things and everyone else could guess what it was. And that really got the audience excited, and they were entering then the live stream with happy faces because they all got to know each other a little bit and they got to play a game.
Max, it seems, just as an observer, that podcasting really took off thanks to the pandemic, where
Mm.
being seen in a room with people could get you arrested. So, some when it looked like it was going to take a while and it wasn't going to be 3 or 4 weeks, that they went to Zoom and stayed on Zoom. Some people have talked about hybrid, and I think it's been more talked about than done well. What do you see is the future of hybrid live and video, and why hasn't it happened, and how could it?
So I'm actually one of the forefront people in the Netherlands that is trying to push the hybrid interaction because there's a lot more to gain audience wise and interaction wise. We are in a world where social media is very receptive. We can like at the tip of our thumbs, we can comment, and everything is moving so quick. And we're often sending and sending and sending. And when it's a long form video or audio platform or a piece of content, you're trying to find that interaction. And we're more seeing that it's a conversation between two people and they're not really reaching into the audience. I think that live podcasting, one, it exposes you to a potential new audience, but it also brings a lot more interaction between audience and platform. And it also creates more ambassadors for the podcast. People that really loved that physical experience of being there and getting to meet the hosts or getting to meet the guests, they will talk about the podcast a lot more and be advocates for the podcast itself. So yes, it is a bit difficult because it also more of a price question at the same time. It also requires a lot more of the technological knowledge. One of the recent podcasts that I did live was in a skate hall. And the difficulty was we were sitting in the middle of the hall and we had speakers. And the speakers actually had to send the sound that was going through the podcast to the audience. But then you actually have to know a little bit of how sound works. And if when they were placing the speakers, because again, one man band at that point, they were placing them behind the microphones. And I said, no, 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 no. They have to go there because if they're behind the microphones, the sound coming out of the speakers will be caught by the microphone and then it will start echoing. So we have to move them a lot further that way. And I think that luckily I'm surrounded by companies that do allow me to have that sort of grip on the situation because there's a lot of podcast makers where I know that if the company says they have to be there, they'll be like, okay. And then they will end up with a product that is echoey or doesn't work as well. And luckily I have people and companies around me, but it is your knowledge and it's your company that sort of is the responsible party that guarantees a good end product. And it was a very cool setup where the audience enjoyed it. There was a lot of live interaction. Downside is you have to film things from a lot further, so take that into account as well. How do you want to film close-ups? How do you want to film medium shots? You don't want to have all of the equipment blocking the view of the audience. So there's a lot more technical aspects coming in, which is fun to play with. But it is a lot more difficult than just having a nice podcast studio where you can control the sound, where you know the room temperature, where you know exactly where everything can be. But the organization, they are very much looking forward to expanding this live podcasting and to actually find that interaction in different locations and make it a bit of a roadshow.
Do you have a launch coming up that you're excited about and you could plant seeds?
So I dropped it a bit earlier in the podcast already, but I am going to build a podcast series where we're diving into what it means to do business. There's a lot of podcasts about different types of businesses where they interview people that have had success with their businesses. But what we especially in the Netherlands don't really have is a podcast where we're talking about different cultural signifiers of business. How is business being conducted before? How is business being conducted now? There's actually a trend going on currently on social media about quarter zips. So about the quarter zip pullover and where people are trading in their Nike Tech sweatsuits for quarter zips. There's this whole sort of rebranding of business going on that we have lost for a little while because people were not wearing suits anymore. People were sort of dressing down in the Netherlands, but now there's a sort of business renaissance happening where especially the younger generation is also taking old signifiers and sort of rebranding them, but there's no podcast really talking about what are these signifiers. One episode would, for instance, be about different watches, the watch culture within businesses, whether you have a Cartier Tank Americain or Famille, or you have your Omegas, your Patek Philippe. Where does this come from? We all know the 80s and we know how people were looking, but there's so many different pillars throughout business when we're looking at the Madman series, how business was portrayed, but also how do people on different levels, such as CEOs of KLM, look at this? How do they look at the suits that you wear? Does it matter to them? Because there's a lot of people that talk very big about if the buttons of your suit don't open, it's not a real suit. And but these are very expensive suits, so it's kind of about that. First season will be fully focused on the Netherlands. The second season, I'm actually looking to take it global and find the interaction between different cultures and how that business interaction is being formed. So that has a very big basis in anthropology. So I'm very eager to explore that. So if there's anyone that would like to spar with me about that, I'm very much open about it.
So we're on Zoom and we're in different continents. So, but there's still maybe both a demographic and a psychographic, and maybe even a geography you want to work with. Who's your ideal customer? How do they get a hold of you? And how would they know they were your ideal?
So my ideal customer at the moment is someone who organizes trade shows, trade fairs, where there's quite some attendees, where they would have a reasonable budget to set up or explore live podcasting in the sense that I described. How they can reach me is it would be best to reach out to me on my LinkedIn, which is Max Frambach. Please do attach a personal note with your invite. I do notice that people tend to send an invitation without talking about who they are or why they are reaching out. And it's become quite difficult to manage a network where you don't know why someone is in your network. So I am very eager to learn more. So it's not just about selling the product, but it's also about learning more about the industry of trade shows, about the industry of trade fairs. So if you are either a location that is organizing trade shows, or if you are a organization that creates trade shows, hosts them, please reach out. And I'm very excited to talk with you about this.
How many languages, Max?
So I speak Dutch, speak English, I speak German, and I can understand Baie Afrikaans. Sorry, I have to redo that one because Baie is a lot, and it's not a lot. It's a little bit. So now you can keep that in.
I want to say thank you to Max, my co-host Wayne, and you, the NAF Business listeners. This has been a real treat. And you know what? If you need to understand how the Matrix works or how John Wick works, you need a kind of a visual stand-in. Max is your lad. But on a serious note, trade shows, turning that fleeting attention into something real and tangible. But not only just in that moment, but even having it so you can push that information out later on. Once people leave and they're going, what was that guy talking about? Or that gal talking about? What was that business all about? Max is there to help you capture that moment and share that moment.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.